Live from MMA Fighting Studios, this is Between the Links. And now, your host, Mike Heck.
The iconic voice of Esther Lynn welcomes you to a brand new edition of Between the Links. Hope you're all having a great week. Hope you have recovered from the ruthless hangover that was UFC 282. We have one more event this weekend for the UFC, and then that's a wrap for 2022. We have the final independent Bellator event of 2022 this past weekend as well. We had judging controversies, stars emerging, a second vacant UFC light heavyweight title fight put on the books for next month. Lots to discuss. So this week, we're just doing it like last week. Another episode of the Mike and Jed Power Hour as I welcome in the exhibition king, Mr. No Gray Area himself, the co-host of No Bets Barred, the winningest player in the history of the game. I could read Jed's resume forever, but it's only an hour show. Jed, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I am still just buzzing off UFC 282, so I'm really excited to talk about it.
Buzzing, eh? We'll talk all about it.
It was great.
Well,
it's been the most fun.
I think the word you used was hilarious. It was hilarious.
Still stand by
hilarious?
It. Still probably the funniest card of the year. Maybe it was 279 was the Nate Diaz kerfluffle, right? That was yeah. Maybe 279 was funnier, but this was right up there at the peak of comedy as far as this sport goes.
Well, let's start with the moments that got everybody all fired up and still has people all fired up. So we'll start with UFC 282. The biggest story was not the main event or the draw in the main event or the aftermath or the new title fight being booked. It was the co-main event. It was Paddy Pimblett winning a controversial decision against Jared Gordon. And let me just say this, Jed, because I've thought a lot about this over the last 5 days. I have been a swinging pendulum with this one because on Saturday, and you know this because we talked before the post-fight show, during the post-fight show, watching it live, I scored it for Jared Gordon 29-28. Thought it was clear as day. Thought the only conversation that could be had about that fight in terms of the scoring was you either scored it 29-28 Gordon or 30-27 Gordon, and you were not at all shocked by this result. Now, I was on team robbery on this one Saturday night, even Sunday morning, even for stretches of Monday. And then Tuesday, before heck of a morning, I decided I'm just going to watch the fight again, all by myself, no distractions, no noise, not even the dog in the room, no audio, no commentary, and I'm just going to see what maybe I missed here, and my scoring is exactly the same as Saturday. 29-28 Gordon, gave him the first 2 rounds, gave Paddy the third. But I will say this, I understand where you're coming from, because first was a clear Jared Gordon round. 2 and 3 were very close, and they could have gone either way. So in a vacuum, watching the fight by myself, how I scored it, just based on how other people may have reacted to it, 29-28 score either way, even if you scored it for Paddy 29-28, it's not a robbery. But then you look at the scorecards, and Doug Crosby and Ron McCarthy both gave round 1 to Paddy, and both gave Jared Gordon the third. Those 2 individual cards for round 1 leads me to at least flirt with the robbery word. Like, I'm not taking robbery home with me. It just didn't work out. Like, maybe I went to the bar and I bought robbery a couple of drinks and I got to know her, but it just didn't work out. So in your eyes,
phenomenal,
because of the way that like first round was actually scored, is there a case to be made for a robbery?
Sure. For exactly that reason, right? Like, so that's been my stance the whole time. And like, I totally get why people are upset by it. Scoring the first round for Paddy, that being the reason he won is because all 3 judges gave him the first, is nonsense. Like, that's just a nonsense score. Sure, you can go look at the stats. I'm sure somebody's in the comments right now being like, check the numbers, it's very close. Your eyeballs tell you the truth of that one. I mean, it was pretty clear. Jared Gordon was landing the harder, more effective shots. They landed about equally, but Gordon's were just much better. That left hand was tethered to Paddy's face. Paddy had no answer for it. That's where the robbery can come in. My issue has largely been, this has been so heated. Everybody's been so upset, so gassed up about it. I still maintain that a 29-28 Pimblett scorecard is fine. It's not the scorecard I would personally give. Even on rewatch, I still think Jared Gordon took the first 2 rounds. And I think that there is a better argument. I think that you can have a better argument for 30-27 Gordon than you can for even 29-28 Pimblett, right? But I still think that scorecard is acceptable. It is just the way they got there. And so if that's your justification for why this is a robbery, I'm with you. Fine. No issues, because scoring that round is robbing Jared Gordon of that round undeniably. But I don't feel like that's where most of this criticism has come from. I don't think people are thinking that critically. They are just thinking Jared Gordon should have won the fight. It was 30-27 Gordon, blah, blah, blah. And I agree that he probably should have won the fight, but I think that it is the overall scorecard is acceptable. So sure, I've never really considered how we think of robbery in that regard, right? Like I've never thought about it as like, well, is it a robbery if the overall scores are wrong, or the way they get there, is wrong, but the overall answer is right? It's a method of, it's a question of process over result, I guess. The process here is very clearly flawed. So if you want to call it a robbery, I'm a little more open to that idea than I was on fight night, but I still have some trepidation about it.
What did you learn the most about Paddy Pimblett? I mean, the week was crazy for the man, said some things that were just not smart, and Ariel just dropped receipt after receipt after receipt on this man. But the response he got when he walked out to that cage Saturday, you can't ignore it. He looked like a star. He was treated like a star. The reaction he gets from everybody in the space, you can't ignore that either, whether you like him or not. But the fighter, Jed, he's solid. He's a solid fighter. And of course, there's little tweaks that can be made. There's always at least a little bit of evolution that can be made, not just in MMA, but in sports across the board. Like, look at the way Greg Maddux pitched in his mid-30s. Totally different guy, still very effective. But is the guy we saw who fought Jared Gordon on Saturday, like, is this him? Like, is this the ceiling, in your opinion, on Paddy Pimblett?
Yeah. That's the things I learned the most about Paddy Pimblett are I was starting to have doubts about I've been very critical of him since day one in the UFC because I have seen him fight before. And this is mostly who he's been. Like, he hasn't really added a ton. But I was starting to feel like, well, maybe I'm wrong, because AK Lee was very pro him because he's the Prince of Positivity, and he is still relatively young. Like, there's a world where he could improve. I struggle to think that he is going to. And again, he's fine. He's a top 30-ish guy. Like, that's good in the scheme of the world to be one of the 30 best people at your job. Like, that's quite strong. I hope that one day I can be one of the 30 best people at my job. That would probably be an improvement. I assume I'm not at that point right now. Well, I didn't learn the things I learned about him were not good, frankly. But it mostly reinforced stuff I already knew. Right? I knew he's a bad striker, and I don't think there's a way to get around it. He can be effective, and those are very different things. I think it's important that people you can suck at striking, technically, but still be effective because you can hit hard and you have a great chin. Like, that's honestly a fairly common road for a lot of MMA fighters. And Paddy's that. He's got a good chin and he is willing to throw, so he is effective. But Jared Gordon is not anyone's definition of a good striker. Like, he's a fine, competent, well-rounded, all-around fighter. But he doesn't have huge knockout power. He has never inspired fear on the feet, and he was piecing Paddy up. I pitched afterwards, and I don't know if we're going to talk about this or not. I think doing the Conor fight right now makes a ton of sense, and they should pull the trigger on that if they can make that happen. Because Conor will kill him. Because if Conor can land the left hands Jared Gordon did, and he certainly can, it's going to obliterate Paddy. And so, it's as soon as he fights one good striker who can grapple with him to any extent, he's done. He is done. That's why Ilia Topuria is an awful fight for him. So it just reinforced that. I think the biggest thing I learned was how he reacted to it all, though, right? Because you learn a lot about people and their losses. And sure, that's not a loss, but for all intents and purposes, let's call it one, right? The bulk of people believe he lost. And the way he handled it was really instructive. he, part of me honestly respects the hell out of just blind ignorance because I'm a huge fan of that. Like I know Ariel went on the show and yesterday and like dropped a couple more on Paddy, who is just like sticking to his story. And honestly, I have a little bit of respect for you just being like, I don't really care about facts. I'm just going to say my truth. And if I say it loud enough, that'll be the way it is for me, and everybody else can get in line or not. That's really problematic, though, if you're like trying to improve and be better at life or a specific skill. And so him looking at that fight, rewatching that fight, because he says that, like, I already, when we watched it, I think I won all 3 rounds, and believing that he is flawless and perfect. It's a hard, like, you're not going to improve. And that's why you're going to plateau and be there at that. You have to be able to, and maybe you can't, maybe you as the fighter, just, you have to have that insane confidence. We see it all the time with fighters, but most of them are able to be a little bit introspective and be like, here's where I had some shortcomings. Here are things I can improve on. Or at the minimum, their coaching staff will be like, yeah, you got to be better than this dude. And I'm not sure that Paddy has that in him to reckon, like to seriously reckon with his shortcomings as a fighter, which is going to cap him.
It's actually been pretty amazing to hear some of the matchmaking suggestions for Paddy, because you have
all over the board, man.
All trains of thought here. You got, man, just give him squash matches in the UK. Just go on the trajectory you were going on.
Great idea.
Some are just saying keep him away from the top 15. Some say just run it back with Jared Gordon in the UK. Some say
it's an awful idea. It's the worst idea I've ever heard.
Even on Heck of a Morning, I've heard Dan Hooker, the Tony Ferguson fight comes up again and again.
Both of those are fine.
Moicano has come up. I had somebody this morning, and people actually agreed with this, that just said, you know what? F it. If this dude's as good as he thinks he is, let's just throw him to Justin Gaethje and give him a
they're Damon Martining
fight.
They're Damon Martining him. Okay, got it.
It's wild to hear all the different suggestions. You mentioned Conor. I doubt that happens, although you make a compelling case for it. But
it won't happen. It is the best fight to make right now. And I believe that with every part of me.
But realistically, where do you think they go?
It's really tough. I think realistically, the UFC takes a step back and fires him up another guy he can beat, because all the people you mentioned are problems. Like, it's a him fighting Renato Moicano is a terrible idea. Moicano's going to kill him. And you're not even getting any like, that's the problem. Here's the thing. Paddy Pimblett is not the golden goose. He is just not. Conor McGregor is the golden goose. Paddy Pimblett is the pig being raised for slaughter. He is not good enough to do the thing that if he was as good as Conor, great. Then he can be another guy who can just poop out gold eggs forever and be a hero. He's not. He just isn't that good. He needs to get clobbered at the right time in the right way. My issues with the Jared Gordon fight beforehand were largely, if Jared Gordon wins this, that kind of just, it's a waste of killing Paddy. We want to do him in the biggest stage, brightest possible, with someone who can carry on that momentum, right? Like, if Conor McGregor, instead of losing to Nate Diaz in short notice, had lost to, I'm trying to think of who's like the lamest possible lightweight they could have thrown at him at short notice. And no one's like Jakar Close or whatever. Like, that wouldn't have done anything for anybody. It would just be like, all right, cool. Well, the Conor thing's done. Paddy is going to lose. You want him to lose to somebody who can take that shine. Dan Hooker, I think, is a pretty good choice in that regard, because Dan Hooker already is an established guy. Fans, people like him there. If Bobby Green comes out of this fight with Drew Dober, I'd say that there's some, you can maybe hope to turn Bobby Green into the next Jorge Masvidal there. Both of those are valid. Tony is the other way. I think Tony wins that fight, But that's the one fight of a guy who's above him that I feel like pretty good. That like Paddy at least has a real shot at winning that fight. And the problem with that is once he wins that fight, then it's done. Then he's a ranked dude and he has to fight Arman Sarukian or whatever, and he's going to get killed. So that's why I think Conor's the best one, because it gets Conor a win. And because it's Conor, it doesn't even take the shine off Paddy that much because everybody's all stoked on Conor anyway. I think, though, we talked about, I think, on the post show, my guess is that we get Terrence McKinney. That's how that shakes out, because that's also a winnable fight to some extent. If he can not die immediately, and Terrence, people sort of know Terrence, and that kind of feels like the way it'll end up shaking out here.
Yeah, and Terrence has kind of built himself up to where he's at right now. This isn't like a UFC push. This is Terrence being Terrence.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
It's a bit of a win-win if Terrence McKinney, because if Terrence beats him, Terrence already has some juice behind him. He just gets a bump. That one's the most palatable to me, but I still think there are better choices.
Yeah, it's tough. Like if we're going to give him a sink or swim fight against a championship level fighter, whether it be past or present, the one name that like keeps coming to mind, and Paddy's going to lose this fight badly, RDA, because if RDA wins, I know, but it's not, RDA's not fighting Conor. It's not going to happen, but this is like the next best thing for him probably. And guess what? If RDA wins, like he's not getting, like the division doesn't suffer is what I'm trying to say. Well, like if Paddy wins, it helps him obviously, and that gives him a boost. But if RDA wins, like it doesn't affect the overall landscape of the division. It doesn't hurt any of the other up and comers. In fact, it might even help some of the up and comers to fight RDA in the future, and it actually mean a little bit more. So that's why I put that idea out there. Like RDA is probably like a minus 500 favorite in that fight, but if we're gonna do that, if we're gonna give him a sink or swim fight, I think that one is not a bad choice.
I still think Dan Hooker is the one. Dan Hooker's still pretty young. If you're going to do that, Dan Hooker is the guy who I think can most capitalize on the Paddy scalp. So which is really, if they're Paddy fans, I'm sorry. I'm here talking about the best way for him to lose because he can't win these fights. Like it's not true. It's not realistically possible for him to beat anybody in the top 20 of this division. Hey, other than Conor. Conor might, I mean, I guess there's a world where he beats Conor. I think Conor would blow his head off, but that's at least possible.
Well, Paddy's going to be a very interesting story heading into 2023, no doubt about it. I'm curious to see how they book him. Curious to see how the ankle holds up after that fight with Jared Gordon, but we'll see. This guy is, he's more than gotten himself on the map in 2022, but let's move on and let's talk about Glover Teixeira, Jed, because he got himself a big opportunity to kick off the new year himself. We're actually going to get to that in a second, but the main event of UFC 282, Jan Blachowicz, Magomed Ankalaev for the vacant light heavyweight title. They fight to a draw. I scored it 48-47 Ankalaev. No issue at all with the draw after rewatching it, but Dana White shows up at the press conference. He is just not a fan of this fight at all. And oftentimes when you hear Dana at the press conference just rip a fight, it's because it's his opinion, but we're also kind of in agreement with him and we kind of have the same reaction. But with this one, yeah, 4 and 5 weren't all that thrilling, but I got to tell you, Jed, and you probably agree with me, the first 3 rounds were very compelling, especially when Jan started landing those leg kicks and started to do damage. I didn't think the fight was nearly as bad as Dana White thought it was, even on the rewatch. I didn't think I'd watch it a second time, but even watching it the second time, the first 15 minutes were pretty damn compelling.
Yeah, fight wasn't bad at all. The truth is Dana doesn't even think that fight was that bad. He's just unhappy with how it ended. Like if that hadn't resulted in a draw, Dana would have come back and just been like, hey, Magomed Ankalaev's our new champion. Look at him. Showed championship heart, adversity, battled back through it. We'd been asking, when is this guy ever going to have to face some real adversity in the cage? And we saw it tonight, Maybe it wasn't the prettiest way, but he did it. It wouldn't have been an issue. The issue is entirely that they Jerry rigged this whole thing just trying to get a champion, and then they didn't, and now they're here. And ultimately, I kind of think it works out for them in like the sort of the falling upwards that the UFC historically does. But this fight was fine. This is not even a bad fight to go rewatch. It's certainly not the worst fight of the year. It's probably not the worst fight of the last. I mean, it's not even probably. It's definitely not the worst like main event of the last 3 months. When was the Grasso main event? Was it in October? Grasso
this wasn't even.
Araujo?
This
That
wasn't
fight
even
was
the
terrible.
worst. This wasn't even the worst Magomed Ankalaev main event.
Oh,
This
well,
was
certainly
not
not.
Ankalaev Thiago Santos, but by any stretch.
Was that this year or was that last year though? Trying to
That's a
look
great
at
question.
this.
I thought it was earlier this year.
It was March of this year. Oh yeah,
Yes.
that's the worst event of the whole year, which doesn't speak great to Magomed at this point, if we're being real. But yeah, this fight was fine. I'm also okay with on rewatch. I'm actually less okay with the draw than it is now. Though it's still not like egregious. I on rewatch, it's 48-47 Magomed for me. I think he runs 1-4-5 pretty cleanly. And I'm not quite willing to give Jan a 10-8 for round 2 or round 3. So it's not awful. It's not the worst scorecard I've ever seen. I don't think it quite rises to what I'd view as a robbery, because it is at least a reasonable person could look at that fight and be like, yeah, Jan wins it. But I think Magomed should be the light heavyweight champion of the world at this moment in time.
But now Glover Teixeira, what a year it has been for this guy. He now gets to fight Jamahal Hill, new main event, UFC 283 in Rio, gets the hometown fight he wanted all along, still gets to fight for the vacant title. And Dana made this one real quick. This is my suggestion, like in the immediate aftermath, if they're going to have Glover fight on this card. What was your initial reaction to this quick trigger booking? And how do you feel about it 5 days later, especially as a co-host of a podcast that has to do with throwing some shekels on the line for these fights?
It's categorically ridiculous, but I'm kind of okay with it. It's a bit insane just because, like, this is why Yuri shouldn't have vacated anyway. He should still be the champion, because, like, it was always kind of dumb doing it. Again, we're going back to this phrase. The process is terrible. Our outcome is good. Like, and then so it all kind of comes out in the wash, right? Because it was pretty much categorical bullshit that Glover was not getting the title fight. He's the former champion, number 1 ranked guy, and by the UFC's rankings, I think by our rankings, very clearly should be involved in a title fight. The UFC comes to him on 6 days notice and is like, hey, will you fight Magomed? No, I'll fight the other dude because I've already fought him. Totally reasonable request and stance from him. And the UFC's like, nah, we're good. We're going to put Magomed. The guy who, by the way, again, Dana is just furious with. So see how this all worked out from their end. He gets screwed over. He's theoretically next in line, but, promises don't mean much, certainly with the UFC in the sport. Anything could have happened. Now, instead of having to fight either Jan Blachowicz, who granted he already beat, but at least at one point during that fight, Jan did catch him with something, and maybe Jan Jan's talked about having an off night that night or whatever. Maybe it would have been different. Or Magomed Ankalaev, who I think is actually a really tough style matchup for Glover. Now he gets to fight quite possibly the best style matchup for him in the entire top 10 for the belt in Brazil. He came out of this thing smelling like roses. It's unbelievable for him. And at the end of the day, I still will hold Yuri Prochazka as the number 1 light heavyweight in the world, because he beat Glover when they fought. That fight was way more competitive than I thought it would be. Fight was awesome. One of the very best fights of all time. Yuri wins. Yuri taps out Glover Teixeira, which I would have never seen coming. So I will give Yuri the respect of holding that top spot down until he fights again. But there is not a soul alive who will be unhappy with Glover Teixeira, the UFC light heavyweight champion, while Yuri is recovering. For him to do it in Brazil will be a moment. That Brazil card needed something. no disrespect to Figgy Smalls and Moreno 4, but that is not the headliner that you need there. This gives them the extra juice for that. And we're going to kick off the year in great fashion. So, yeah, it all came out okay. The process was terrible, but we got to a good end result.
Who gets a 205-pound title fight first? Jan Blachowicz or Magomed Ankalaev?
I'm still going to say Ankalaev, but I don't feel any level of confidence in that particular pick. Just, I can't, because I believe Glover is going to beat Jamahal Hill because Thiago Santos, famed grappler that he is, took Jamahal Hill down at will. So I suspect Glover is going to be able to do it and do a lot better than Thiago Santos did. And I just don't see them running back Jan Glover 2. That fight, well, Jan had like a moment or two. The fight wasn't wildly competitive, and both guys are going to have to get a win to get they're going to have to fight somebody. And my guess is I'll pick Magomed to beat any light heavyweight in the world at this point. It might not be pretty. Let's be real. It may not be an entertaining watch, but I do think he is good enough to beat anybody at 205 right now. So that's at least a fresh matchup. Magomed beats, let me pull up the light heavyweight here. Rakic is probably done. They'll just run like Anthony Smith Magomed back or whatever. He'll win that fight and then he'll get the next one. I don't feel wildly confident, but I think that's the most likely outcome.
UFC 282, obviously a very interesting night. We had 10 straight finishes to start the festivities. So we obviously talked the two biggest storylines, but top 3 standouts of the rest of the names on the card.
Dricus du Plessis, for sure, just because he finally ended the Darren Till thing. We don't have to talk about Darren Till anymore. I'm thrilled. I'm so excited. He's going to take some time off and go back to not being very good, which he's been the whole time. People just got confused. And DDP he's top 10 guy now. He's going to get an opportunity at somebody, up high, I would imagine. And guy's awesome. Guy's fireworks, fun as hell to watch. I don't think I probably doesn't ever challenge for the belt, and I'm really confident he doesn't ever win it, but guy's just a great time to watch. Great performance. Super in on it. Ilia Topuria. Do we need to say? that dude obliterated Bryce Mitchell, and Bryce come out with I got the flu or whatever. You got your ass beat, son. That's all you got. I don't know about any illnesses you had, but I saw the fear in your eyes the first time Ilya landed on you, and there's nothing wrong with that. Not a lot of people want to take him from that guy. That dude is a problem. He is for sure going to challenge for a belt, and given that he's only 25, 26, good odds that he ends up holding the belt at some point in his life. So that dude is like the number one with the bullet. And then the answer you're supposed to give, I'm not going to, so I don't really want to talk about Raul Rosas Jr. again. He's probably the true answer because this dude has got shine on him. People are very interested in his story. And if you're one of them, cool. I'm reserving my feelings on the matter at this point. So I will say for the third one, it's Edmund Shabazian. Because, look, I can never say it. Dalcha Lungiambula was pretty much tailor-made for Edmund. But this is what you wanted to see from him. He is still super young. He's still 25. He had some real tough setbacks, but this kid came in with a lot of promise, got overhyped for sure, settled back down, left the terrible fight camp to actually work with real professionals at Extreme Couture, and looked better. And I'm not saying let's throw him in there with a top 10 guy immediately, though he might still be ranked in the UFC's ranking, so he may get somebody like that, but he's still 25 with a lot of upside to him, and he's with a real team and a real camp, and he looked good. They got him a win, which is really what he needed. He needed a confidence-building win. String another one or two of those together, and let's see what we've got with this kid because he has a lot of talent. So he's going to be my third choice.
Yeah, Taporia probably like 1 and 2. If
Yeah.
we're being honest, I mean that
He's
dude.
by far,
So
he's the
good.
top man.
Oh, yeah, he's the man. What a performance! He needs to fight Arnold Allen, number 1 contender fight. I don't care where the UFC has him ranked. That's the fight to make. My third choice, I'm not going to go with Rosas Jr. either. It's probably the safe answer. I'm going
It's
with the
definitely
action
the
man.
safe answer, but
I'm going with Curtis. This guy is just incredible. He's incredible. And I think people got to see really just how defensively savvy he is and just overall like creatively savvy, because watching the fight initially, as you're watching, you're like, oh, Joaquin's beating the crap out of him. But if you actually like go back and watch it again and just turn the sound off, you just see how good Chris Curtis is defensively. He basically just let Joaquin just punch himself out. And the first chance he got when he knew Joaquin was starting to slow down a little bit, he knocked him dead. Chris Curtis is great. I don't know if he's going to be a guy who's going to fight for a title, but that man is going to fight for your money every single time he gets in there. So lots of fun options for him. Middleweight, Jed, it's pretty fun. Like this division has made some moves this year. Has it not? We got a new champion and Alex Pereira. We got DDP coming up. Roman Dolidze. It's apparently he's fighting Marvin Vettori now.
Yeah, I saw that just dropping on Slack. So
it's reported. Not 100% confirmed by your friends at MMA Fighting, but somewhat confirmed. So that fight's happening. Chris Curtis making moves.
Forgot that the UFC has Jack Hermanson like stupidly high. It's like, that feels like a big jump for Dolidze, but he's actually 8 in the UFC's ranking because they still have Jack Hermanson in the top 10, which is kind of insane, but okay.
Yeah. Middleweight's a lot of fun.
Middleweight is a lot of fun. Darren Till holding the number 15 spot in the UFC rankings.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what they do with him. I'd like to see him go back to 170 if it's physically possible. He might have something left in him. I don't know.
I think it's physically possible. You heard DDP after be like, he's too small. DDP, former welterweight KSW champion, by the way, who could never make welterweight again. Like he's not the biggest middleweight there is, but he is a sizable middleweight, and he dwarfed Till. He felt it. It looked like it. I always, and this is hot take or whatever, I always thought Till could make it at welterweight. I entirely thought that was a discipline issue, and that moving to middleweight was not the answer because he's not very good. And so at least be big. If you're not going to be good, be big. And look at his success. The one win, like the 2 good performances, I'm using good liberally because Kelvin Gastelum was not a good performance or fight. Former welterweight Kelvin Gastelum and former welterweight Robert Whittaker. Like those are the 2 times he looked like not an awful fighter in this division. He's not talented enough and he's not big enough to compete against like Derek Brunson or whatever. So I think he can make welterweight. If Jose Aldo can make bantamweight and apparently should have been fighting a bantamweight the entire time, Darren Till can make welterweight.
I completely agree with you. So maybe that's the route for him. We'll see what happens. But before UFC 282 went down, and people were mad last week because we didn't give Bellator enough time. We only gave him like 5 or 6 minutes at the end of the show, but Bellator 289 went down at beautiful Mohegan Sun Arena in scenic Uncasville, Connecticut, the rolling hills and sprawling landscapes of Uncasville, Connecticut. Main event, Raufeon Stots successfully defends his interim bantamweight title against Danny Sabatello. I think the fight was probably closer than you thought it was going to be, Jed. We're going to take
it was way closer.
The Doug Crosby. Yeah, the Doug Crosby scorecard is an abomination. It's egregious. It's literally the worst scorecard I've seen all year and probably the worst scorecard I've seen in many, many years. 50-45 for Danny Sabs is a ridiculous scorecard. If he had scored it 48-47 for Sabatello, I wouldn't have had a giant issue with it. I think the right guy won, but 50-45 Sabatello is ridiculous. But something tells me that this fight was a lot more interesting and competitive than you thought it was going to be.
It was way, way more competitive. I'm trying to see if Bellator has stats on this one, and I'm not finding any because I would love to see the strike stats basically from Sabatello. I scored it 48-47. I was not watching like super critically, so take that with all the grains of salt you want. Broad structures, that fight looked like I thought, in that Sabatello is not a very good striker and Stots is a better striker. I missed entirely believing that Stots would be able to shut down the wrestling game. He really didn't. Sabatello mostly got to his spots and pulled off takedowns with relative ease, frankly, against Stots. I was surprised by that. And I will say, we talked beforehand on the preview show or whichever we did. If Sabatello can win one of the first 2-3 rounds, things get really interesting because we were both pretty confident that Sabatello would win 4 and 5. That's not really how the fight played out. Sabatello won 2 of the first 3 rounds. Or if you're Doug Crosby, he won all of them, and then he also won 4 and 5. And it was Stotts who adjusted and kind of fought him off. And it was a very different fight than I anticipated. And honestly, maybe this is unfair, but my biggest takeaway of that fight, God's honest truth, was, oh, Patchy Mix is the best bantamweight in Bellator. Got it. Because I thought for sure it was Raufeon Stots. Like, he's looked so good in all of his fights for the most part. He's got the pedigree. He's shown very good work with the hands. But a guy who was simply committed to wrestling him and could do it, he really struggled. And like you said, if you score that fight for Sabatello, I don't think it's necessarily wrong. 50-45 is wrong. But Stots was playing defense for a bulk of that fight. He just landed some more damage, which is, the primary scoring criteria at this point. That's how it goes. I think it like I said, it's not unreasonable to say that Sabatello won that fight. And so him doing it despite him having that performance despite being so limited raised my stock a little bit on Sabatello, lowered my stock a little bit on Stots, and then you mix in Patchy Mix looking like an absolute monster. I'm like, oh, that's actually the best bantamweight in the world right there, or the best bantamweight in Bellator. Probably not the world.
Yeah, I thought Sabatello clearly won the first round. I thought he won the 4th round. I thought Stots won 3 and 5. 2 was the swing round because watching it live, I thought Sabatello won round 2, but I got killed for it. So I went back and watched it again. I'm like, all right, I could see how you thought Stots won the round, but 48-47 for Sabatello was not out of the question.
That would have been like the least controversial card of the many controversial scorecards this past weekend. Yeah, would have been I don't think anybody would have even really been upset other than Stots, who would have obviously been livid, but I think it would have been fine.
Patchy Mix, like you said, is a monster. I thought Magomedov, I mean, not saying he's not good, but I didn't expect that. I picked Magomedov to win that fight. So, I just thought overall game, I just thought it was just slightly better than Patchy, but man, Patchy's finding himself right now. He's making weight. Not saying he wasn't taking it seriously, but he's taking it all very, very seriously, not just in fight camp, but just everything to do with this Grand Prix. Dude I just couldn't get the whole Gallagher build out of my brain. Like, you've been wanting this fight for a year and you finally get it in a big spot and then you miss weight. And then, you struggle a little bit with Gallagher. You end up putting him away in the 3rd, but you have a tough start. You come back. So by the time we get to Magomedov, I'm like, probably not a great overall stylistic matchup for him. Golly, was I wrong. What a performance. Put that man to sleep. And I think you're right, Jed. I think Patchy is the guy to beat right now. And man, Raufeon Stots versus Patchy Mix is a very intriguing fight now. Much more intriguing than I thought it was going to be.
It's way more intriguing, except for I think Stots is screwed. Just Patchy Mix is going to take him down, and he's not going to hold him, because I don't agree with everything Raufeon Stots said when he was on the MMA this week, but certainly as the fight with Sabatello progressed, Sabatello's biggest issue in that entire, he did nothing but find control positions and hold them. He effectuated no real offense. Patchy Mix is not going to do that. He is going to rope those big lanky arms of his around your neck and try to choke you unconscious, as he has done several times before at this point. So I think Stots is in a world of trouble. I'm sorry. There's I don't know if you can hear it. I assume you can. There's a man blowing leaves right in front of my house. I'm staring at him in the face right now, and he just keeps doing it. Hi.
Is he
Hi.
waving to you as he's blowing the leaves?
No, I just
Oh, are you
waved at
on
him.
air? Are you on air? Okay.
You can
Super
see me in
boost power.
headphones with the microphone. Still going about it. Okay. I know there are leaves right there. They could leave. They don't have to be. It would have been fine. He's about to exit his way. So, okay. Forget where I was. I'm going to close it out, though, with this. I feel like I maybe said this at some other point. But one of my favorite things about this entire sport, Mike, is Patchy makes post-fight speech just killed me. He's back. Good to know. Other side now. But Patchy makes just being like, yeah, I decided to take this seriously. I feel like MMA is the only sport where that is like a really common refrain among world-class fighters. Like they are never interviewing the Super Bowl champion and they're like, Matt Stafford, you came to Los Angeles. What happened? Well, for 12 years in Detroit, I was just kind of half-assing it and I was pretty good. And then I was like, I'm coming to LA. Maybe I should step my game up and try really hard at my profession. And then I won the Super Bowl. It happens like once a month that some fighter is like, yeah, so I don't really train ever. Like I would just be like, oh, I got to fight. Let me make weight and I'll just go fight some dude. And I did pretty well and I made it to top 15 in the world. I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I lost because that's not how that works for anybody who's not John Jones. So I thought, maybe I might actually try. And Patchy makes just being like, yeah, I decided to take this as like a real sport and a profession and not something that I'm doing. And now look at me, I'm good. It cracks me up.
Shout out to Ryan Spann for starting
Ryan Spann being the guy.
Wintry trend of, maybe I'll start training. And there's a big difference because, like, I remember Jake Matthews after the Fiallo fight. He didn't say that. He just said, all right, I'm like a man now. Like,
yeah, I grew up.
I got like muscles now. Yeah, and
I finished puberty.
I'm clicking now. Like everything's starting to click. It's not, you know what? I didn't really try, but now I'm trying. Yeah. Love that.
It's just the best. Like I desperately want to see just to see one person do that in the NBA. Whatever. Just like Russell Westbrook's just like, yeah, so I know the Lakers have been really bad. It's because I kind of wasn't giving a shit. And LeBron sat me down. I was like, I guess I'll try really hard now. And now we're winning. Just be unbelievable. Fake ass sport, man. We cover a fake ass sport.
Speaking of post-fight speeches, Liz Carmouche just beat the hell out of Juliana Velasquez. That was an impressive performance. No
Honestly,
doubts
the most shocking outcome of the whole weekend for me.
Why?
Because the first fight was good. Like, not necessarily Liz Carmouche won, but like she was losing that first fight until she wasn't. There was no doubt. She came out here and ran over that woman, ran over Juliana Velasquez. Like there wasn't nothing for her there. Best performance of, frankly, Carmouche's, maybe not her whole career, but of the last 6 years, probably.
She wants 135-pound division, and as a member of the esteemed MMA Fighting Global Rankings panel, I really hope Bellator does this. I hope they do a bantamweight division and bring in some new faces because Lord knows we need women's bantamweights to actually rank at this point because getting 15 of them in there right now is a struggle. And if they put this division in there and Liz is a bantamweight, at least we can put her in one of those spots. At least we have somebody to fill that gap. But this is a tough one, man. Having to decide between, Lucy Pudilova and who was the other one?
I don't know. I left number 15.
Lena Landsberg, maybe? I don't remember.
I already had Landsberg and Pudilova in my rankings. And so I decided not to. Previously, I'm trying to remember her name off the top of my head, like a no-name person, like somebody who's the bantamweight champion out in some rural bum show. And I was like, I don't know, you've got a 6-1 record. And I watched 2 videos, you can kind of grapple. Sure. So there just ain't nobody. So yeah, Bellator, make one and build it and hope they come. Don't build it because you have the bodies, because you don't. They don't exist right now. But build it and try and make it happen, because this was once the marquee division, and now it is what it is now. You know.
So Bellator independently done. Of course, they have the Bellator versus Rising card coming up on New Year's Eve, which should be a hell of a lot of fun to watch. But
it's dope. Dope card.
Very dope card. I'm very
Pitbull
excited
versus
for it.
Kleber Koist that's dope. It's a good fight. Really excited about that.
So
one.
good. And I love the AJ McKee fight. All those are going to be really interesting. It's going to be a fun event to watch. So hopefully we all get to watch it live and enjoy it for what it is. So UFC Vegas 66, Jed, final UFC card of 2022. And I got to say, Jed, top to bottom, looking at this one, especially compared to a lot of the fight night cards that we have spoken about throughout the year on the show, this one's pretty good. This is a pretty solid fight night card, is it not?
Oh, for sure. I'm pulling up Orlando right now to see if I think this is better than Orlando was. Because I actually think I do think it's better than Orlando was. Orlando had some higher highs probably. I'm not even sure that's true, because Sarukian Ismagulov is just chef's kiss. Like, that's probably the best fight of the whole month, for being real. That fight is incredible. Yeah, this card's great. Like, you know me, normally tell people, hey, just tune in MMAfighting.com. Don't watch this one. Got a 4 p.m. start time. Very, very good card. Looking at it, like, there is maybe 2 fights on this card that I'd be like, unnecessary. If we got rid of them, I wouldn't be in any way sad, which is a huge rarity these days, certainly for fight night cards. Usually you could paint with a broad brush and be like, if we knocked off 5 of these, it is not going to change my enthusiasm level for this card at all. But no, card's great.
Main event, Jared Cannonier versus Sean Strickland. Like, what are these guys fighting for right now? I mean, we do have a new champion. Sean Strickland just got bolted by Alex Pereira just a few months ago. Cannonier obviously hasn't fought Pereira yet, but is this just 2 dudes fighting?
It's just 2 dudes fighting. Shouts to Sean Strickland. Not a phrase I say a lot, because Sean Strickland is not a man you should model your life, career, or personal thoughts about after. Sean Strickland is maybe the hardest fighter in the world for me to deal with, because every rational part of me dislikes everything he stands for, but God, he is compelling and funny as hell. And it's hard to separate the fact that he's an admittedly bad person and the fact that I kind of want him to stay in my life in this capacity for a long period of time, because I have so much respect. Maybe respect isn't the right word. It's the one I'm going to go with, for him coming out and being like, if I fought Alex Pereira again, I'd do exactly the same damn thing. Like, I know that didn't work out for me, like, at all. would change nothing. Exactly how I would go about it again. Like, that's a man after my own heart, refusing to learn or adapt and just live, just being who you are to the absolute fullest. That is, and he's probably going to do the same thing as Jared Cannonier. And by probably, he's definitely going to do the exact same thing as Jared Cannonier. And maybe it'll work out this time, because Jared Cannonier is a fine fighter, but he is not a striker to the level of Alex Pereira. But it won't shock me at all if Cannonier just knocks Strickland's head to the 3rd row, which will undoubtedly be hilarious if it happens. So they're not fighting for anything other than a paycheck and the amusement of, millions of fans around the world. And in the end, that's a pretty good thing to fight for. So I'm in for it.
10 minutes ago, you had somebody blowing leaves around. Mother Nature is blowing everything around right now. It is freaking monsoon outside. Wind is howling.
It's like midday. It's about right for the low country.
Yeah, we haven't dealt with this in quite some time, but it's happening right now. Sarukian versus Ismagulov just friggin' rules. It's a great fight. And I kind of feel for Arman here, because I do feel he won the Gamrot fight. I know it was super close. I've watched that fight more than any fight this year. That's like, if I need a boost on the treadmill or something, I just watch that fight because it just gets me all fired up and I run a little bit faster and a little bit faster. He probably deserves better than this, if we're being honest, but Ismagulov, I mean, you can't fault the man's resume, undefeated in the UFC. I don't think he beat Guram Kutatsiladze. I thought Guram probably got that one. And that's what gives me a little bit of pause here, Jed, because my gut is telling me that on paper, this fight is very compelling. It's just like one of those, ooh, this is a good one. But I feel like the fight itself is not going to be all that compelling because I think Tsarukyan is just going to big brother him for 15 minutes. And I think this could be his coming out party. I really do. I think this will be one of those, all right, maybe the Gamrot fight, we didn't get to see his best. It was a great fight, but maybe we doubted him a little bit. But I think after this one, I think people are going to come back around if they fell off the wagon a little bit. I feel like this is a really good matchup for Tsarukyan. Tough because Ismagulov is technically very good everywhere, but Tsarukyan's just one of those, at least in my eyes, he's one of those kinds of up and comers and prospects that just don't come along all that often in terms of skill set and an overall game.
I know you've been super high on him. I think this is a really tough fight for him. I'm picking him to win because I'm also pretty high on him, but Ismagulov is, I won't be like shocked if Tsarukyan just big brothers him, but I'll be surprised. Ismagulov has given up one takedown in his UFC career. It was to Kutaladze, who kept the position for like a minute, maybe. Like he is a very good defensive wrestler. He hasn't faced anybody who is going to chain wrestle the way Tsarukyan is, but he is still really good. And he's got a great jab, just a great jab. And he has got the height and the reach on Tsarukyan. Tsarukyan's going to have to navigate that jab. And I think this is going to be a battle. I'm picking Tsarukyan, taking him to win by decision. I think he is going to eventually get to his spots, but I don't think this is an easy night in the office for him. And it won't surprise me if Ismagulov manages to edge out like a Gamrot-esque decision, something where maybe Tsarukyan should win or more people feels he won, but the bigger spots, the bigger moments were Ismagulov's. And so Tsarukyan just kind of falls short on the cards again.
I like this is a 3-round fight too. For if you're a Tsarukyan backer, I just feel like Tsarukyan had to have learned so much from that Gamrot fight. Like he had to just take so much away from it. And I don't know if Ismagulov was able to take as much away from the Guram fight, but I mean, on paper, just a sensational battle. Last thing here, this is a loaded card. We get some pretty solid names, some interesting cats on here.
My favorite about this fight is, by the way, these guys would absolutely murder like Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier, and I love both of them. But these guys are top 15 because lightweight is impossible, not because they are the actual 15 number. They should be like 5 and 7 or something like that. These guys are unbelievably good. This fight rules. I'm so stoked on it.
I thought you were gonna say Paddy.
Oh no, God, it wouldn't be close. Ismagulov would probably get his first finish in the UFC against Paddy.
I think I have Tsarukyan like number 7 in my lightweight rankings. That's how
I think I have him like 5.
I think I bumped him up after the Gamrot loss because I was just that impressed with that.
I bumped fight. Both him and Gamrot up after that fight. I was like, yeah, both of these guys would beat Dustin Poirier tomorrow, so we're going to move both of them above.
What's the low-key banger? What's the low-key banger in this card? There's a lot of good ones.
Oh, it's a good question. Does Drew Dober Bobby Green count as low-key?
I don't think so.
Okay,
probably. I think that's the actual people's main event.
I agree. That is the people's main event. You've been listening to No Bets Barred. Low key banger. Manel Kopp, David Dvorak, maybe.
Ooh,
I just love Manel Kopp. David Dvorak's going to probably try to make it not that much of a banger, but. You know what? I'm going to say Jake Matthew Simmelsberger. I think that'll be my official answer. Lock it in. just because Jake Matthews looked so damn good last time out. And Simmelsberger is not great, but he's game. And so this is probably going to be less of a banger than a real, maybe not a coming out party. I think Andre Fialho was a coming out party for Jake Matthews, but he is going to really establish himself as a guy you don't want problems with at 170. So I'm going to pick that one. But it's tough to go wrong. This card's mostly great.
Yeah. Caceres Saros is good, but that's a main card fight. I love the Matthews fight because I think he'll be able to show a little bit more in that one because you mentioned the toughness and durability and the overall athleticism of Matthew Semmelsberger. He's probably a little bit better than his record indicates. It's probably
Semmelsberger is wild because my general belief is that if you're A+ athlete, you should be an A+ fighter because 9 times out of 10 that pans out. Semmelsberger is the 10th time when it doesn't, where he's just like fine. He is a way better athlete than he is a fighter, and it's very frustrating.
It's probably, for me, the battle of the Saeeds. Nurmagomedov versus Akhramonov.
Love the Saeed battle too.
God, man, that's just going to be fun. That's going to be the Sarukian Gamrot kind of matchup on this card because both these guys are just so scrappy, and Nurmagomedov's probably a little bit more well-rounded because I think his striking's better.
Definitely
but
more definitely.
God, man, this fight's going to the floor. It's definitely going to hit the floor for big portions, and the scrambles and everything that's going to go on down there. It's just going to be so fun to watch. It's just going to be so fun. So that fight rules. So shout out to those two guys.
Every fight on this card, there are like 2-3 fights on this card that are fine, that are unnecessary, but they're even watchable. Like everything here should be watchable. So good fight card.
Yeah,
good way to end the year.
14 fights. Looks like we're good to go there. Last thing, we just found out a little while ago, confirmed with multiple sources, that this will be the main event. It's not happening in South Korea. It's actually happening at the UFC Apex. Derek Lewis versus Sergey Spivak back on the books. Jed Meshew.
Okay.
Yes,
Breaking
heavyweight
news.
battle. We are going to have some Apex fight nights, and I think this will be... No, this isn't the first one of the year. I think the Gastelum Imavov card might be. But this will be one of them. They're going back to the world's finest Apex. Derek Lewis, Sergey Spivak. It's back on the books.
Apex.
It's back on the books. 5 rounds of this, Jed Meshew, potentially.
Oh, yay. I truly hope that there are not 5 rounds of this event. It would be very tough. And this is at the Apex? You're like, this event is happening at the Apex. Right?
1,000% it's happening at the Apex.
Dude, look at the fight card. Aside from having the road to the UFC things, is this just a fight card of like Southeast Asian fighters that this is clearly supposed to be in like the South Korea card, and they're just gonna fly all to Las Vegas for no reason.
Yeah.
Incredible work. This is the best.
No, we don't know. I mean, we don't know what's gonna stay, what's gonna go, but
this is the best.
I don't know what they're gonna do, but yes, that is. I saw this one. I was like, this seems weird for South Korea.
It just looks like a fight card that should not be happening in Las Vegas, and yet it is. Like any regular person could look at this and be like, "Man, okay, a lot of interesting choice for this to be in Vegas. You sure you didn't go on the road? Nah, Apex, baby, let's go." And then we get Derek Lewis, Spivak. That's fine. It's 2 outcome fight, which I appreciate those. Makes it very easy to know Spivak gets the takedowns or he doesn't, and that determines the outcome. My guess is he doesn't. It's hard to have any level of confidence in Derek Lewis after his recent run right now, so it's fine. It's a fight. It sure is a fight.
And we'll see. Maybe Sergey Spivak will graduate from Derek Lewis to Tai Tuivasa if he gets a win. So it could be a banner year for Sergey Spivak if he can get the job done on February 4th.
See,
is that the same date as the Bellator card?
I don't remember the Bellator stuff off the top of my head. Hold on. Let me take a look. Let me see if I can pull this up semi quickly. February 4th, Bellator
Ooh.
290. Yes, indeed.
Head-to-head, baby. Some head-to-head action. Yeah, I think I know.
Heavyweight counter programming. It is hard for me to figure out which of those heavyweight fights is better, which is a scathing condemnation of both organizations, if we're being honest.
Well, February 4th is going to be a very busy day. The following weekend will be very busy as well, of course, with the UFC.
So when's the Super Bowl?
Is that it's the 12th, I think.
Okay, I was going to say they're definitely not doing this on Super Bowl weekend. So, or are they? And they're lunatics. But no, the 12th would make more sense. Okay.
Yes. Well, that's it for this edition of the show. Tomorrow, normal stuff. Preview show. I will not be there. My vacation begins tomorrow, so I'll be off pretty much for the next couple of weeks. I think we're gonna. Yeah, I got to do a lot of traveling to see a bunch of family I haven't seen in like 2 years. So this is what we're gonna do.
I don't know what a vacation is. That's interesting. Okay.
I know. I get to freeze my ass off, so it is what it is. Preview show tomorrow. Probably 3 p.m. Eastern, People's Pre-Fight Show, Post-Fight Show. AK will need a co-host for on to the next one on Sunday, so we will still do a show. I think we're going to try to do a BTL next week. I think we're going to do it in podcast form, perhaps. Maybe we'll do our annual award show nomination program where we just get a little round table. We round off our top 5. We debate each other and say one of us is way smarter than the other. And then on to the next one. Programming is just going to be a lot of fun because AK and I will go through our 2022 predictions to see who was better. I went back and listened to the program. There were some really interesting topics. We fell short on quite a bit of them. And then AK and I will have our 2023 predictions extravaganza where you submit all your questions, buy, sell, make them interesting, think outside the box. AK and I will pick up the best 25 or so of them. We'll go through them, and then we'll make our champion predictions, and then our Muy Caliente bold prediction of the year. AK and I were both wrong on our Muy Caliente bold predictions.
What was it this year? I can't remember.
AK's was let me see what they were. AK's was Khamzat Chimaev will lose a fight. And mine was Anderson Silva will win more boxing matches than Chimaev has UFC wins.
Did he only box the once this year?
Maybe twice, but he only won one.
You're pretty close though. You were close in yours, so
I was close. I wanted to be a little different than Chimaev just loses.
Yeah, no, that was a reasonable, muy caliente pick, and you almost got there.
I was very, very close. Very
at the beginning of the year, that was a very hot pick because the idea that Chimaev would have fought like once, I certainly wouldn't have believed you. Be like, no, that's insane. Already fight one time.
He fought twice.
Oh, did he?
Holland and Burns.
Oh, I forget that the Burns thing was this year. In my head that was April. Jeez, 2022 has been forever. In my head, that was like last fall.
I was saying earlier, like this year, some days I feel like this year's taken 15 minutes, and some days I feel like this year has taken 7 years. It's just one of those years.
Wild times. Well, now that I've made an ass of myself, we can close her down.
Hit the music, Casey. Hit the music. We appreciate you on the ones and twos. We appreciate all of you for watching, and we'll talk some more for the next couple of weeks as we roll on into 2023. Well, we appreciate you. For Jed Mishu, Casey on the ones and twos, I am Mike Heck, the iconic voice of Esterlin takes you home. We'll see you next time right here on Between the Links. Good night, everybody.
Love you guys.
This has been Between the Links, an MMA fighting production. Thanks for watching. Happy birthday, AK!